What's up, guys? Sparring Cat, and in today's Battle Cats video, I've picked a random dozen units, and I'm going to decide whether they're overrated, underrated, or somewhere in between. Or they might be a little overrated, a little underrated, but I have 5 different boxes to put these 12 units in, and I will determine where they go. Starting things off with Dark Cat. Recently, I got a comment about how the commenter was arguing that Dark Cat is better than people make him out to be because when he's a true form compared to Flying Ninja Cat, they are actually closer than people imagine, and Dark Cat also has better stats. So that was something, and I was like, all right, that's a little interesting. But the problem is that by the time you get Dark Cat to his true form, he's already sorely outclassed by so many units. And when you get him to his true form, and everything, he really has fallen off. So, although Dark Cat might have better stats than Fly Ninja Cat at high levels, the problem is that by the time you get to him to those high levels, he has very little to offer. So, by getting him to the high levels, this shows that he's basically a user rank dump. Moving on, we have Eraser, and I know you guys clicked the video seeing him on it, and oh man, here come the comments. I'm putting him in slightly overrated. This is the original Eraser, not the crazed Eraser. And please hear me out. So, we all love Eraser. He has carried all of us through the game at some point, many, many times I would imagine. And he is one of the best meat shields in the game. And not just that, maybe one of the best units in the game, period. And I love him. So many people love him. But the thing is, he gets outclassed by his crazed counterpart, and right now I'm grinding Uncanny Legends, and Specialist Meat Shields have been very important. Specialist units have been important, and he's not a specialist, and he just gets outclassed by his own crazed counterpart. But he is an amazing meat shield, and I highly recommend just about anybody to use him at any point in the game. He does get outclassed by some Specialist Meat Shields, but all generalist meat shields do. It's just that he's slower than his mana counterpart and just not the better of the two choices most times. So I'm going to put him at slightly overrated, but in the early and middle parts of the game, he's almost necessary in every lineup, and definitely necessary in every lineup until you get Manic Eraser. But nonetheless, an absolutely amazing, beautiful unit, but he is slightly overrated in my opinion. Moving on from that, we have another meat shield in Rice Ball Cat, and I'm actually, for Rice Ball Cat, going to put him in fairly rated. Previously, I put him in overrated, but I looked back, and when you talent him, he's immune to freeze, immune to toxic, he's immune to slow, and you also get his stats up 80% more health. That's huge, and it fixes his health problem, and all of a sudden his cost becomes more justified. However, there are some stages where he's too expensive to be used effectively, and be wary of that. Kind of similar to Paris Cat, you have to make sure that you're not draining your wallet just to send him out where he won't help enough. So be wary. But moving on, we have a unit who I honestly have been doing research on. I just got him to level 40 today, which kind of prompted me to put him on this list. But Master Uriel. And I'm going to put him in slightly underrated, actually. And the reason why is because when you get his true form, he is great versus AKU and Relics. As he becomes strong against both of them, he gains general stat boosts. His recharge time goes down 20 seconds, and that included with more range, more DPS, more damage, more health. All of these things are very useful. He also becomes immune to Surge, which is also another useful thing because I'm just getting to the point where there's all these different bases in Uncanny Legends, and that's starting to upset me. I just faced the Surge base, and that was interesting today. But Master Uriel, and eventually when you get his true form, pretty solid. Before true form, decent unit, probably fairly rated, nothing overly great, but his true form has some very good abilities that most units dream of. Moving on from Uriel, we have Beefcake, another unit that I kind of, I was telling people not to use because of how low his stats were. But when you talent him, he could become useful. And the reason why is because mainly his Surge immunity talent. So when you start getting an Uncanny Legends or you face Advent bosses and you have very few units immune to Surge, you could simply get him talented, and for 75 NP, you have yourself a spammable attacker that is immune to Surge. And that does automatically give him a niche that few units have. I will say, however, that's about where the upsides for him go down, because he is easily replaced by Paris Cat, and on top of that, he is generally lackluster in terms of power. But in terms of anti-surge enemies, he could be a go-to for you, especially once you talent him. Moving on to Bullet Train, and I'm going to put Bullet Train at fairly rated, but I do want to recognize that his ×2 money is very useful on top of his speed, and his burst damage is good, so it's kind of like owning your own personal Brawly. You just send him out, he gets a hit or two, and he dies, but he brings you the bank, and you're good. So he does a good job. I just wanted to address him. And moving on to Professor Cat Jobs, I absolutely love Headmaster Cat Jobs, excuse me. I love him, and I think he's underrated, but a lot of people are starting to catch up to him. The fact that he is 99% weakened with a Surge, so he can pretty much permanently weaken enemies and reduce them to 1% of their attack power, which is gargantuan. But the downside is his low speed, his low survivability, low range, low health, all that stuff. So you might only get him for a little bit, but if you can keep him alive and bring him to the right stage, then he will be hell for your enemies. He is a great unit when used properly and used at the right time. Moving on to a unit that I didn't even think was good a few months ago, but that's because I didn't know he had a true form. Apparently, Master of the Pacific. And I'm going to put him in slightly underrated, since there was other people that were telling me that he's good, and that I was under a rock. But I'm personally using him in my lineup. I have him fully maxed talents, level 50, and he has a spot in my lineup, and he has a ton of range, his Surge guaranteed, and he is incredibly powerful when used correctly. And if, man, God forbid you start stacking him, then he is a force to be reckoned with. Keep in mind, he has very, very low health, but when you max his dodge out, he can't even be hit 80% of the time, so that automatically makes him, in terms of probability, quite low of a chance to hit him and kill him. But if you do hit him, he's pretty much dead. I do think he's slightly underrated, because people are starting to catch up to that and realize that Mola Mola isn't just a meme unit anymore. He's actually good, and for me, he's been a great addition to my lineup. Moving on from that, Yukimura, and I think it's fair to put him in fairly rated, just because people know it's like having a second Awakened Muhammad Cat in your lineup, which is always welcome. I mean, I love Awakened Muhammad Cat. Most of you do too, but he deserves a role. And not only that, but against black enemies, he is very powerful, rush in, and really helps get rid of them, especially the really tanky ones that could destroy your own army. So by sending him out, it does help out. And excuse me, but he does become quite a damage dealer and a game changer if you duel him with Awakened Muhammad Cat, or even IDI if you get further into that. So those three would be very tough to beat. And if you just want to throw a Mecha Bun in there too for fun, go ahead. But he's not as good. My next unit's going to be Kyubi Cat, and I'm going to put him in underrated. People know about him, but I just don't see him in a ton of lineups. And correct me if I'm wrong, because there probably are a lot of lineups that do use him, but from what I've seen, he's often abandoned for other meat shields. And he's cheap. He has survival, so he can survive lethal strikes. And on top of being a cheap unit, and by the way, this shows his second form, but I'm specifically talking about his first form, which is a spammable and everything. But he is a good addition and a pretty risk-free option, especially for being used in restriction stages and all that. So I think he is a good addition and should be checked out by a lot of people. Going in slightly underrated is going to be Misley. And I can go on a tangent all day that Misley Syndrome is bad, but Misley's upsides are usually just as powerful. And in a lot of situations, Misley is just a powerful anti-alien specialist that could slow and knock back aliens, and a good amount of times that works. But it doesn't work when there's a long range attacker in the back and you're kind of just pushing your enemies into him, and then you're sending your enemies to death. So that's not good. But when used in the right circumstances, Misley is a very powerful and a good unit that can be paired with other elemental pixies or other anti-alien units. Moving on from Misley, we have, I keep forgetting his name, Cat Typhoon. And Cat Typhoon, I'm in fairly rated. I think enough people use him in their lineups because he is so powerful. You start spamming him, or even just using one and meat shielding him. He is almost always guaranteed critical hits with area attack, and he attacks super quickly, so he's going to usually get a few off. So you get a ton of value off of him, and he gets enemies off your backs, so that's good. And I can't think of a lot of downsides besides sometimes you gotta wait a while to get him back, but a lot of times you can meat shield and protect him and even duel them sometimes, so that's always welcome. Moving on from Cat Typhoon. Oh, that's the end of the list. That is the a dozen units. So the only overrated unit I have, and I know I'm going to hear comments about this. Feel free to put them down below, but just a disclaimer, I do think Eraser Cat is a hair overrated. And then you can see the rest of them here. We have 5 in fairly rated, 4 in slightly underrated, and 2 in underrated. So this is my opinion. It's subjective. This is also my list. But if you guys enjoyed the video, please make sure to leave a like, comment down below what you thought of it, and turn on notifications because it all helps our channel grow. And make sure to subscribe if you enjoy the content. Going back to the comments, just make sure to keep them civil. Let's engage in good discussion, not useless argument. And thank you for making it this far. Hope you enjoyed. SpartanCat signing off, and I'll see you in my next video. Peace.